Hey guys, so let's hop right into it. Bunny. So Spotify employees are very unhappy with Joe Rogan being, you know, Joe Rogan, the man who made $100 million from their company for a reason. But for some reason, some Spotify employees notice how it's not the employees that actually write his checks, like probably the CEO, CFO, or the people who are actually in charge of Spotify. It's just employees are unhappy because he has made remarks that they try to use things like he's spreading misinformation. No, you can't spread misinformation when it's just your opinion. Opinions are very quote unquote flawed, but they resonate with the individual for a reason. Not to get in here and talk about what's an opinion, what's not. But so this is an article from the New York Post. The title is, I'll put the link of the article in the description if you haven't. It's about a week old. From Hannah Frischberg is the writer of this article. The title is Spotify Staff Reportedly Outraged by Joe Rogan's Show. Just for context, there was already rumblings in the streaming streets about how even when they signed him, there was this whole outrage and there was this whole type of discontent with potential problems that could cause, which is, I guess, now come to fruition. And they wanted to delete episodes before they officially were posted on Spotify. They're trying to, because they don't want like the Alex Jones of the world on the show and certain guests in the past that are very extremists. And so the article starts, Joe Rogan, the notoriously polarizing host of the Joe Rogan Experience, America's most popular podcast in 2020. Well, there's a good reason for that. Is upsetting some Spotify staffers, according to a report. Employee complaints, however, fall on deaf ears of company executives who paid the 53-year-old comedian more than $100 million to exclusively stream on the platform. Yeah, look, when a company pays someone $100 million, they're not going to really care about employees, what they may have to say about it. Because the reason why they're paying that guy $100 million, because they know he's going to bring exponentially more value to their company, let's just say after the contract is done, than when he came in. And just right now, just because the amount of followers and type of following he has in general, it's worth so much more than the $100 million they gave him. So, one comment by a Spotify employee last fall was, "I'm personally bothered by his transphobic comments and am concerned with the way he might spread misinformation." Okay, let's break down for people that may not be very an avid listener of the Joe Rogan Experience. I am a very avid listener, at least in the past year and a half. A little bit before he came on Spotify, but especially now it's more convenient. I've always been a Spotify consumer. By the way, my podcast often beat on Spotify. Go check it out. Anyways, and one thing about his stance on trans, his issue isn't with trans people who are transgender. It's when it becomes in competing in athletics, specifically like Olympic lifting, any type of sports where if a man transitions to a woman, there's going to be such an advantage just because they've had all the biological advantages that man has over a woman in physical sports, hence why there are men and women sports. I'm not here to give my opinion on that. I am here laying out Joe Rogan's stance on it. As you can tell, someone who is who is basically the voice of MMA when you break it down, the literal voice of MMA. There's a reason why they have men and women separate fighting each other. But beyond that, the irony that people that get mad about his stance about transgender shouldn't compete in the regular male and female just because you identify transgender, because there's still going to be biological advantages. This isn't about an opinion. Now, the irony, here's where my opinion comes in. The irony behind people who say that men that transition the woman should be able to compete as a woman is that you can support transgender but also be able to protect records in a sense. We're in this world of protecting women, but we don't want to protect woman world records that were done by actual biological woman. Because you are not only rewarding extreme behaviors to success. Because you could have a below average people that came and qualified for Olympic trials type of thing, regional Olympics, and they transition to being a woman, and all of a sudden they're superpowers. They are breaking world records left and right. You can look up all the videos. This isn't supposed to be like anti-trans, but I'm giving his stance on it and why he's so passionate about it. Because it's about protecting the integrity of world records that have been accomplished by people who have worked their whole lives to compete against people who have worked their whole lives to compete against. And you're not only having people take shortcuts to break these records, but you're having people take advantage of a very touchy subject, of a very controversial and one that you can have people who, if they have an extreme will to win and will do anything to win, that when people are in that mindset, they will do anything to win. That literally means some of them will do anything. Some will literally, cut the Johnson off and be a brat about it, and vice versa. Now, that's more of his stance, is protecting the integrity of the records. And it's like, to my opinion, it's ironic that we're all about protecting women. But when it comes to actually protecting accomplishments, for example, and awards, somehow we don't want to protect the things that actually may leave a legacy, in a sense. Now, the biggest thing was recently in the past month was him. Another thing that Spotify employees they were very unhappy about his stance on the vaccine. Look, he gave his view about how the vaccine, his view about the vaccine was simply that if you are healthier, which if you listen to this podcast at all, it's basically a huge promotion about how health and taking care of yourself is paramount to your well-being. As much as controversy that may come with the Joe Rogan experience, whether you're a fan of it or not, the dude always promotes healthiness. He always promotes taking care of yourself, eating right, exercising. That's basically his solution to a lot of things, which is a very positive thing. Instead of taking pills left and right, you know what? Go for a walk. You're having a problem, you're stressed out about something, go work out. And it will probably reduce your problem stress level by at least like 25-50%. There are studies about that. But his view on the vaccine essentially was that if you were in your early 20s and stuff like that, like, you don't need it per se. If you take care of yourself and stuff like that, if you take care of yourself, eat well, exercise, you are much less of a risk at it. Studies have shown, because, a lot of it has to do with comorbidities, which essentially means that if you have pre-existing conditions, you are more vulnerable to COVID and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into whatever your belief is about that, vaccines and stuff. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. I'm trying to give his point of view of why that is very important. It was not. Now, he did kind of backpedal a little bit about the vaccine. And because, he, as someone who understands his platform and has a big ass fucking platform, in my opinion, I don't feel just because you have a big platform that you have more of a responsibility to make sure that you are saying 100% every little fact correct. And by the way, he has young Jamie to literally fact check everything he fucking says. And even then, you can still mess up when you're talking 2 to 3 hours. And not to defend when you fuck up, but if you go to the Joe Rogan experience to dictate whether you are going to get the vaccine or not, or whether you're going to get very specific medical advice, that is a you problem. That is a definition of a you problem if you're relying on a comedian podcaster. And he never identifies himself to take, it's not, his podcast isn't supposed to be educational or informational specifically. Sometimes you could learn things based off guests he has. For example, if you were going to go to the Joe Rogan experience and everything he says, take it home. No, you listen to it, you do your due diligence on whatever it is, and we always talk about do your research. Well, you know what? It's funny how do your research applies until you hear something on a podcast and you do something and it negatively affects you, but you didn't do your research to do before if you were applicable to do whatever thing you ended up doing that was said on a podcast. For example, there's a guest that been on the Joe Rogan experience named Carl Hart. He is I don't remember what kind of doctor he is, but he's a legit doctor of some sort. He didn't do any drugs or anything till after the age of 30. Because he started studying literally all the compounds and very hardcore drugs. And this man now, he does heroin for his health and well-being. I wouldn't say he promotes doing heroin, but he certainly doesn't say don't do heroin. Now, if you were to listen to the Carl Hart podcast that he's on, common sense would say, well, you know what? This doctor does heroin and it makes him a more calm person with his family. You know what? That's my solution. That's all I needed. It's like, no. You should probably do your due diligence before you stick heroin in your body. You should know if you're in your early mid-20s that heroin doesn't do a lot of good for you just off a whim. But it is not Joe Rogan's responsibility. Just because the whole point of it defeats the idea of a podcast is when you start trying to negate the possibility of open conversations. Funny how we want open conversations, except the person that does it best and has shown to do it best is Joe Rogan. When you really think about it, think of a dude with the versatility it sounds like I'm sucking Joe Rogan's dick right now, but the reason why he's the best at what he does is because he can literally talk with anyone about anything and hold his own. Having 4-hour conversations with fucking science, whatever Neil deGrasse Tyson is. I don't know what the fuck. He's like an astrophysicist, I believe. He could talk with the doctor who does heroin for his well-being. He could talk with Duncan Trussell for 5.5 hours, high as hell. He can talk with Elon Musk. He can talk with people of all facets of life, journalists, comedians, and it could be entertaining, and sometimes you can learn some things from it. But this whole Spotify employees being fucking mad at him, it's like, the great thing about this country, God, I'm going to sound like an old head when I say this. One of the great things is that you can quit a job today and they cannot sue you or hold it against you. Like, there are certain things in contract clauses where if you leave this job, you can't work at another job that's a competing, that's a competitor to our company for like 6 months or whatever. But that's if you're making bank at a job, typically, if you have a high-level position. Like, if you're just a delivery driver for Amazon, you go apply FedEx the next day, and Amazon can't say you can't work for FedEx for another 3 months. Now, typically, like a CEO for, let's just say a Spotify. If you're a CEO for Spotify, and then you go and transfer the Apple Podcasts because you want to work there, you know what? Typically, if you can't work somewhere for 3 to 6 months, there's typically a buyout clause, which means they're going to pay you to not work. And so, but if you're just an employee there, you could fucking leave and go work anywhere else if you were so worried about the message that Joe Rogan is sending when all he's doing is conversating with fucking people. And the irony is the whole point of podcasting is to prevent censorship. The FCC is not incorporated in podcasting. They can't control what you say or do. The only thing that really controls what podcasters say or do is sponsors. But if you take that away, then basically you got radio. How many of y'all listen to fucking radio? The whole point of podcasting is so you don't have to settle your mind on watching Fox News and CNN for a very relegated, incorporated money news type of thing, where they're only going to talk about what they're getting paid to talk about. The thing that makes the Joe Rogan podcast so fucking great is the simple fact that it's one, genuine, is that the dude did it for 10 years before he got paid the hundreds of millions of dollars he got. Now, obviously, after a few years when he started getting traction, he probably got paid off sponsors and stuff, but never to the amount of money he's getting now. He probably made pretty decent money beforehand. But you don't do 3 episodes a week, 1,700 plus fucking episodes, if you don't enjoy doing it. He has even said that the podcast started off the simple fact that he just wanted to. He just liked to do it. And you tell the man still enjoys doing it. And he's the definition. I think when people see Joe Rogan, I think there's a jealousy factor because the dude is living the dream because he started something from scratch and did something just because he wanted to do it, and he happened to make money off of it now. A lot of fucking money. I think there's a lot of jealousy and there's a lot of resentment towards that, to be honest. Because Joe Rogan literally has, from the outside, the greatest jobs in the world. He covers the sport he loves to do. He's really, he is, there's obviously like Adam Curry and Mark Moran were like the godfathers, like pioneers of podcasting. But Joe Rogan made it so goddamn mainstream and made it to the masses. He really set some trends, like the first person to do 2-3 hour podcasts. Main thing is that it's unedited. That's what makes it, because you actually feel like, one thing is like sometimes when you hear or watch a podcast and it's too edited, it's too scripted, like it's hard to really feel and delve in the conversation. Say what you want, but when there's no editing in the sense of they're not taking segments and stuff, like even when someone takes a pee break, they just continue rolling and he'll just entertain the audience until they get back. Honestly, in my opinion, you can't even pay. Like, there's not really a minimum amount of money that, in my opinion, that Joe Rogan, like, he really, when you think about it, he's really underpaid. And I know that's crazy, $100 million for 3 years or whatever, you're underpaid. But this man literally made podcasting this phenomenon. Something that's really, it's been around like 12, 13, 14 years. You could look it up or whatever. The first one that was ever created. But I believe there are over 2 million podcasts that have been created, right? Now you do the numbers, like 80,000 have been made, an episode has been made the past 30 days. 50,000 has been made in the past week, which essentially means what are active, what is not. So sometimes 2 million podcasts, oh, holy shit, you're competing against 2 million podcasts. Like, no, because 12% of podcasts quit after one episode, and, you know, and so if you make it past like 14 episodes, you're in a higher percentage of it. Now, essentially, my final thoughts on this Spotify employee being mad at Joe Rogan. If you want to start taking the spontaneity, the ability to be wrong away from podcasting, and you're asking perfectionism for people talking, you are literally going against everything for why podcasting is so great. It's the fact that it is flawed. It is the fact that it feels real most of the time. And it is the fact that it is interesting. Part of being interesting is differing opinions, having open conversations. And if we want to have those open conversations, making outcries when people, may be incorrect or misinformed is not the way to do it. And just because you have a huge platform, that doesn't mean you have a responsibility to act a certain way. We don't ask our favorite artists to act a certain way because a lot of young kids look up to them. Hey, you shouldn't make music videos with a lot of asses twerking. It's like, sounds like a parenting problem. Sounds like a you problem. If you, it's just kind of, it's kind of like this thing is kind of like a microcosm of really what this life thing has become. It's this whole censorship bullshit. And I'm not this thing of, oh my God, I'm being censored from Spotify. But you can tell Joe Rogan does not give a fuck. And that's what makes it more enjoyable to watch. The fact that you could throw stones at this guy and he's just like, don't watch, don't listen. And if you're going to me, and I'm third person Joe Rogan here, if you're going to me, Joe Rogan, for your health advice of where you should get a vaccine, that's a you problem. You go to experts for expert opinions, but that doesn't mean non-experts can't have opinions for things. And there's a reason why a lot of people come on his show. Because they know how impactful his show is to their popularity and things like that. But yeah, that's my opinion on the Spotify staff being outraged at him. Essentially, grow a pair. Get over it. If you don't like what he says, don't watch, don't listen. And I think that's kind of what makes Joe Rogan very appealing. He never forces you or please watch my show. He's like, meh, you'll either watch or you don't. He could really care less. But yeah, to the number one podcast in the world, shout out to Joe Rogan.